Well, here we go again. It's time to take on yet another video by Adherent Apologetics. Now, honestly, I'm not really looking for these things. I just kind of fall into them because I've had to keep an eye on his channel for obvious reasons. But when you see things this wrong going on, you just have to respond. So, ready or not, this one is going to be brutal. Let's get going. Honestly, I am not trying to go after this guy, but I have to keep checking his channel for responses, and when I do, there's always some new piece of eye-rolling silliness that I feel I have to take a look at. It's not personal, I promise, but this guy is becoming a new Frank Turek or Andy Bannister with his theistic nonsense. So this time, he wants to give us 12 reasons why Christianity is true. This ought to be good. If you don't want to get your absurdity pointed out, don't post absurdity. Okay, here we go.
What's up, everyone? My name is Zack. I'm going to give you 12 reasons that Christianity is true. So let's get into these 12 reasons.
This ought to be good. Now, I will say I've taken a look at other religious channels that have said, well, here's X reasons why I'm right. And those reasons are never, ever good. They never stand up to any kind of critical scrutiny. It's always, here's something that makes me personally feel good. It's never about demonstrable truth. It's always about emotional comfort. If you just step away from the blind faith, all of it falls apart. And the reason, I'll predict, is because they start with the assumption that the things that they believe must be true because it makes them feel good to think that it is. Thus, they start looking for bold rationalizations for why these emotionally comforting beliefs are automatically true. They can't question the validity of their beliefs. It's just not in the theistic playbook. But let's see if he can get it right.
Reason number 1. Absolute truth exists.
Says who? Because that's just a bald assertion. You cannot provide any evidence for that claim whatsoever. Now, at least he isn't just grabbing Bible verses to prove that the Bible is true, at least not yet, although that happens constantly with religious apologetics. But from just that claim, he doesn't do anything to prove that Christianity specifically is true, which is his claim. The only way for Christianity to be true is for Christianity to be demonstrably true in each and every single one of its claims. And I think we all know that's simply not the case. If it was, Christians wouldn't need faith. But go on, Zack, back up this claim.
If you say that truth is just relative, that would be a self-defeating statement because that would be an absolute statement.
That's not the way this works, but I think we need to define what we mean when we talk about truth. Are we talking about fact, or are we talking about dogma? If we go by the dictionary, truth is defined as that which is true or in accordance with fact or reality. It is synonymous with the facts. If that's what you mean by truth, then I'm with you. That kind of truth, by definition, exists. How does this say anything about Christianity?
Either God exists or God does not exist.
Yep. But now it rests completely on your shoulders to demonstrate that God does in fact exist. When do you think you're going to get to that? Faith doesn't mean a damn thing. You need evidence. Got any?
Only one of these options can be true. Reason number 2.
Wait, hold on. That's it? First off, your first reason had nothing at all to do with Christianity. It made a statement that God is either real or not, but it didn't conclude which of those two options were actually the case. This is really why I start to question his honesty, or probably more accurately, his ability to tell what is an honest argument and what is not. This is common to a lot of theists. They are so emotionally attached to their beliefs that they can't imagine them not being true. Therefore, that is the assumption that they go with and figure they just can't be wrong. God is either real or he is not. Well, since God is obviously real, well, they believe it after all. That's the only answer right there. So they win without even trying. All right, now go back and substitute anything else for God and see if it still stands up. Cthulhu is either real or he is not. Are you just going to blindly assume that he is? Or is that not how logical arguments work? Anyhow, get back to your next point.
Reason number 2. The universe almost certainly began to exist.
Yes, it did, depending on how you define your terms. That doesn't mean God did it, and it doesn't mean Christianity is valid. But again, I'm sure he's just going to assume that every other creation myth out there, well, they all just had to be invalid because his is automatically right. He's not going to prove it after all. He shouldn't have to because he's got faith, don't you know? But how is that any different than, say, a Zoroastrian saying exactly the same thing? Does that make Ahura Mazda automatically responsible for the creation of the universe? Because if it doesn't, then Zack is wrong too.
Modern scientific discovery has made it very clear that the universe did, in fact, begin to exist. This can be seen with the expanding universe and the impossibility of an infinite chain of universes.
No, because we simply do not know that. Yes, it seems like this universe is not going to contract. That does not mean that a billion, trillion, infinite number of universes before it didn't. We could be the last in a near infinite chain backwards of universes that did exactly that. This is just one more place where, because it fits into their narrative, the religious simply make assertions that they absolutely cannot back up. It's really sad that we have to keep pointing this fact out.
Reason number 3.
Hold on. I was under the obviously mistaken impression that these reasons were supposed to prove that Christianity is true. I mean, it is the title of your video after all. That means you have to link these absurd assertions to your religion in some demonstrable way, and you're not even trying. The universe began to exist. Okay, and? There's got to be a lot more to it than just assuming that proves your case.
Reason number 3, the fine-tuning of the universe.
Which still doesn't exist. Because there is still a difference between something being fine-tuned, something being demonstrably intended for the purpose of something existing, and something just so happening to permit that thing to exist. So we'll go back to that Douglas Adams puddle analogy once again. Just because the puddle is convinced that the hole is perfectly formed to allow the puddle to exist, that doesn't mean that the hole was created just for the puddle. There was a hole. Water fell into it. That formed a puddle. No design involved. This is just Christians being in love with themselves. There is zero critical thinking going on here.
There are many constants that fit into precise ranges, and if they did not fit into these given ranges, humans, or any universe capable of supporting life, would not exist.
Not necessarily. Not capable of supporting our form of life? Sure. Not capable of supporting any form of life? Well, that's something you'd have to demonstrate, and I don't think you can do it. Just because you can't imagine what kind of life might exist in a different universe, that doesn't mean that no life of any kind could possibly exist there. But again, He's got an agenda, and he's got to find a way to get there, whether it makes any logical sense or not.
Reason number 4, objective moral truths do exist.
Says who? Because this seems to be a pattern. You just make a bald assertion that fits into your religious narrative, and then you just assume that it has to be so. That's not how any of this works. You cannot provide any objectively demonstrable evidence that your claim is true. None whatsoever. Come on!
The fact that we know rape is wrong shows that there's an objective moral standard of truth which could only come from God.
That's a whole lot of nonsense right there, packed into a single sentence. So let's look at it. First off, clearly, everyone doesn't know rape is wrong, otherwise there would be no rapists. Think about it. If rape was objectively wrong and every single one of us had that written on our hearts, then nobody would do it. Christians and other religious people just have to make up an ad hoc reason why things aren't as they clearly ought to be according to their own theology. Because it just doesn't work otherwise. It makes no sense. And all you have to do is go to other cultures to find out that rape isn't objectively wrong. It is practiced and reasonably acceptable within those cultures. Now, that doesn't mean that I agree with it. I certainly don't. But that doesn't stop it from happening. You have to deal with reality, Zack. At least try.
Reason number 5, millions upon millions of people have experienced personal encounters with God.
Prove it, because millions and millions and millions of people have reported personal experiences with other gods too. And aliens. And Bigfoot. Just because someone arbitrarily assigns the cause of something they supposedly experienced to God, that doesn't mean God did it. Just because someone had a bad dream and attributes that bad dream to a succubus, that doesn't mean a succubus was responsible. The only way to get from point A to point B is to prove that A is actually and demonstrably responsible for B. Christians can't do that. Let's stop playing make-believe, okay?
People all over the world have claimed to have had personal encounters with God.
The operative word there is claimed. They have claimed to, not been demonstrated to, claimed to. Now, how do we demonstrate that these claims are actually real? Because that's what you need to do if you want them to have any credibility. Good luck. Lots of people have claimed to have been abducted by aliens and had probes shoved up their, well, you get the picture. Are all those automatically true because someone claimed it? No? Okay, moving on.
Either all of these people are liars or delusional, or these encounters with supernatural forces have actually happened.
Let us know when you can prove, with evidence, which of those happens to be the case. I'm sure the Bigfoot community will be quite interested in your results.
Reason number 6, there are plenty of credible reports of near-death experiences.
Really? How do you tell the difference between a credible report and a non-credible report? Oh, right, the credible ones support your religious beliefs. Because there are studies of indigenous cultures where they see their own gods. In fact, there's a book out there by Gregory Shushan called Near-Death Experiences in Indigenous Religions, where he tells the story of a 1646 case where a Huron Indian woman supposedly died and was buried, only to later climb out of her grave and tell people that she found herself in the Christian hell, right up until she was rescued by a spirit and shown a beautiful valley where non-converted indigenous peoples could live for all eternity without evil. This is not uncommon, yet Christians pretend that they're the only ones that see religious imagery during times of stress. Yeah, way to get it all wrong, Zack.
If you look at academic research, there's a lot of reports of stories in which people who are near death experience things that they never should have.
All of which has already been explained through brain chemistry. And the funny thing is, a lot of it we can replicate in the lab. We've been doing it for a long time. Go look up the God helmet, Zack. It's a device that produces electromagnetic fields over the temporal lobe of the brain. These fields are identical to those measured in EEGs of dying and distressed patients. And the people who wear this helmet, even though they are otherwise completely fine, they have religious experiences. They see ghosts. They experience past lives. They see long dead family members. They see God. The more you believe in these things, the more likely you are to interpret the experience as an experience with the supernatural. Honestly, Zack, it isn't that hard. Do some research already.
These experiences help build the case that there is a supernatural realm.
No, it just builds the case that you're gullible. Anyone here want to disagree? No? All right, let's move on.
Reason number 7. Miracles happen.
Prove it. This is yet another claim without evidence because it plays into your pre-existing religious beliefs. You want it to be true, so you proclaim that it is. And that's not impressive. Now, normally, I'd ask if you were going to trot out some evidence for us to look at, but come on, we all know you're not. This is going to be more, I'm right because I'm right nonsense. So get it over with.
Like near-death experiences, there are many accounts of miracles happening all around the world. This builds to the idea that there is a supernatural aspect to reality.
No, it does nothing of the sort. It shows that people are willing to arbitrarily assign answers to things that they do not understand. But let's get away from that for the moment, because I want to bring up the fact that not one of the supposed reasons actually demonstrate Christianity to be true. This is just someone throwing crap at the wall and hoping something sticks. This is the same tactic used by flat earthers, for crying out loud. Zero evidence presented, they just make a bunch of unsupported claims in hopes that something resonates.
Reason number 8. The New Testament has thousands of copies and no manuscriptal issues relating to major Christian theology.
And more than 400 million copies of the Harry Potter books have been sold. Does that mean that Voldemort is real? Because that's your argument. It doesn't matter how many copies exist. It matters if you can prove with evidence that the contents are valid. How about you get on that, Zack?
The amount of manuscripts of the New Testament that we have is drastic compared to any other ancient text. What is even more amazing is that even though there are textual variants, scholars can put together very accurately what was the original writings of the New Testament.
Which still doesn't prove that any of it actually happened. Again, we actually have the original documents for Harry Potter. We know that the books out there are amazingly accurate. That says nothing about the truth value of any of the 7 books. This really can't be that difficult, can it?
Reason number 9. The disciples died for their beliefs.
Well, that's the story. We can't even prove that they ever existed in the first place. They are likely just characters in a book of mythology, although it is possible that some of them were based, at least loosely, on real people. There's just no independent evidence for any of them at all. We have no independent eyewitness accounts. We have no bodies. We have no demonstrable graves. We have nothing. We have no independent official records of the supposed deaths they suffered. The further you delve into this, the less you come up with. So this is, at least until you can offer some better evidence, just another empty religious claim. Do better.
The disciples were in a position to know whether or not Jesus rose from the dead, and most of them went to their deaths saying that Jesus did rise from the dead.
Says a book of mythology. That's nice. And the Quran says Muhammad rode off to heaven on the back of a winged horse. Big deal. The Enuma Elish tells the story of Enlil destroying humanity with a flood. Whoopee. It's one of the places the ancient Hebrews stole their own flood traditions from, after all. Just because it appears in a book, that doesn't make it true. This is just bald confirmation bias. What else is new?
That puts a lot of support to the claims of these disciples.
No, it does nothing of the sort. It provides a reason for you to have blind faith. It does nothing to provide any evidence for the claims made in the Bible. Try again.
Reason number 10. There are no contradictions in the Bible.
What? There's tons of them. I mean, hell, start in Genesis 1. There are two entirely separate creation stories, one of which has man created before the animals, Genesis 2:18 through 19, and the other has him created after the animals, Genesis 1:25 through 27. There are nearly 100 clear contradictions in Genesis alone. Who brought Joseph to Egypt? Was it the Midianites, as in Genesis 37:36, or the Ishmaelites, as in Genesis 39:1? I can go on and on and on and on, and that's just one book.
And alleged contradictions can be explained. The Bible has no contradictions in it. Most of the alleged contradictions that skeptics bring up have been explained, and if they have not, they will be.
Which doesn't mean that they're not contradictions. This is just absurd confirmation bias. Well, there can't be any contradictions, and if there are, we'll get around to them eventually. These are not explanations. These are rationalizations. They are based on the blind belief that there can't be any contradictions, and therefore, they just have to have some explanation. Seriously, go look at their explanations sometime. They just make stuff up. Well, this must have happened because it's the only way we can come up with to hand wave away this thing in the text. No, that's not how it works. Unless you can prove that that thing happened, you don't just get to assume that it did.
Reason number 11. There are countless fulfilled prophecies in the Bible.
Not one that you can prove anyway. There are things that they said that eventually came to pass, but none of them are impressive. It's like me saying, well, tomorrow the sun will rise. And it does. Big deal. It does that every day. There's nothing in the Bible, nothing at all, that specifically names details about an event, and that event takes place, demonstrably after the prophecy, mind you, in exactly that way. It doesn't happen. It's like the prophecies of Nostradamus. They're all extremely vague and can only be fulfilled in retrospect when someone realizes that they can twist the events to fit in with the supposed prophecies. You can't say, well, in 12 years, this is gonna happen. It doesn't work that way. And that's all that's going on here.
The Bible contains around 1,800 prophecies, and many of these can be shown to have come true.
Name one. Name one that has any demonstrable detail that came true exactly as it was described. You can't. Some Christians will point to, say, the prophecy that Tyre will be destroyed, described in Ezekiel 26. It says that Tyre will be destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar to such a degree that it will never again be habitable. Of course, that never happened. Nebuchadnezzar, despite a 13-year siege, never destroyed Tyre, and when it was finally destroyed, 240 years later, it was by Alexander the Great, and newsflash for you people, Tyre exists to this day. Ezekiel 29, 1 through 15 says that God will make Egypt into a barren wasteland. It provides 8 criteria. And absolutely none of them have ever come true. I can go on and on and on and on and on.
For example, take Isaiah 53, which was written hundreds of years before Christ. It talks about a suffering servant from whom the story of Jesus perfectly fits.
Yeah, not so much. This is a misunderstanding of the passage because they are ripping it entirely out of context. The servant being discussed is, in fact, Israel itself, which was currently suffering under the control of Assyria. We can go back to Isaiah 41:8, which reads, "But you, O Israel, my servant." This also appears in Isaiah 44:1, 44:21, 45:4, and 49:3. All of chapter 53 talks about how Israel was being mistreated under Assyrian rule. It just doesn't fit. But could it have had a second meaning to foretell Jesus? No, it can't. It simply doesn't fit with the details of the Gospels. Isaiah 53:7 says that the servant remains silent during their persecution. Except Jesus, in John, certainly doesn't do so. He chats up Pilate. So is Isaiah wrong? Or is it John? We don't know. You tell us. Isaiah 53:10 mentions the offspring of the servant. Okay, are there children of Jesus that we just didn't hear about? There are a lot of other similar passages that simply do not fit with Jesus of the New Testament. This is just Christian wishful thinking, projecting their blind faith into the text and completely shredding its context.
Is this a coincidence? I think not.
Yeah, you think not. Instead, you just blindly believe. That's the problem. If you thought about it, if you actually considered the evidence and weren't desperately searching for anything that would help you to prop up your blind faith, then you'd see just how badly this proposition stands up to any kind of critical scrutiny. But of course, you just don't care.
Reason number 12. Every other religion is about people trying to reach God, whereas in Christianity, God reaches us.
So what? That doesn't prove that Christianity is true. But I think that's been the case for every single one of these silly reasons. It's all just assertions based on wishful thinking, not arguments based on evidence. Because they have no evidence. They have faith. They start with the conclusion that they're right, then they assume, wrongly, that everything has to point to that conclusion. So they run around cherry picking. They look for things that they can twist to support their pre-existing faith. The things they can, well, that's proof. The things they can't, well, that's irrelevant. We're just not going to talk about that. It's got to be wrong because they have to be right. Yeah, that's dumb.
This is what makes Christianity special and one of the big things that drives it apart from other religions. In every other religion, salvation is based off of human efforts. In Christianity, all we have to do to achieve salvation is to repent of our sins, confess, and believe in the resurrection.
Well, that's your story. You still have no evidence that any of it is true. You seem very attached to your tales, but you're not at all good about actually being able to back them up. That's the issue. I'm not interested in what you believe. I care about what you can prove, and nothing in this list proves that Christianity is true. It doesn't even come close. It doesn't even make a good faith effort. It's just cherry-picking nonsense, desperately seeking to get to a predetermined conclusion that you believe for emotional reasons. That's not an honest way to evaluate reality. Sorry.
So you can do that right now and be a part of the family.
Just like Charles Manson or the Jamestown cult.
So thanks for listening. I'm Zack. This is Adherent Apologetics. I'll see you next time.
So, thanks for failing. But, geez, you're good at that, aren't you? I'd like to be charitable, but it's really hard. It isn't like these failures are difficult to address. It takes 20 seconds on Google to find the problems with all of these claims. It's that I don't think he cares. He's demonstrated that. And honestly, how much longer do you think he's going to leave his comments open, now that he's been found by the skeptical community? Standard theist operating procedure is to just go into hiding. Now, I'd like to think he's better than that, but I really don't know. I'm not going to make any prophecies or anything. It really doesn't matter anyhow. The real question is, what will he do now? I've taken on several of his videos and shown that his claims are simply unreasonable and irrational. Will he change them, or will he just double down? Because that's where I will make a prediction, and unfortunately, it has to be the latter. I know he said that he wants to know the truth, but he's fallen, hook, line, and sinker, for every religious lie under the sun. He's adopting a view for emotional reasons, and the second that someone points out what he's doing and where he's going wrong, I'm just not seeing him admitting his failures and changing his ways. But what apologist ever does that, right? Virtually none that I've ever seen. Now, some of that is the sunk cost fallacy. The idea that because you've wasted so much of your time believing this unsubstantiated nonsense, you simply cannot admit that you are wrong, or you'll look like a fool. And I'm sorry, but that's not an excuse. If you're wrong, you're wrong. You don't get to be any less wrong by continuing to believe asinine religious garbage. You do it by admitting your mistakes and doing better in the future. I'd love to see that happen, but I'm not holding my breath. That requires someone who cares more about the facts than they do about their feelings, and I'm sorry, but I just don't see it in him. I'd like to be wrong, though. I really would. Prove me wrong, Zack. Please, prove me wrong.
Boom, 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 boom.